So with me, it was kind of a little bit of almost the opposite, but and you live and you learn, because I know, like, my mom gave me, I would say, a good amount of freedom growing up. How did you get to the point of, like, actually trusting my decision making skills?
Barricaded the door with a chair. And the next thing I know, I hear 911, 911. And I'm like, oh, snap.
You're persistent. You have this level of confidence that's amazing to me, because you are very, very confident, in your role, in your career. Like, she was that deal, y'all, okay? Handling business. First thing I wanted us to discuss, Mom, is our relationship kind of like early on. So really kind of like focusing on your parenting styles. And just so you know, my mother raised me as a single parent, right? So she was the only parent, that raised me, that had any real influence on my life or anything like that. How did that kind of like influence how you raised me, just decision making, that kind of thing?
Could not wait to have a child. And for the first 6 years of your life, I was married. And then I became a single parent at that point. It seemed as though there was always a balance between trying to be the best you could be in your career and the best parent that you could be at the same time. So I got into the habit of saying, I'm raising my child alone. I had to make a speech at church, and I had to write something about parenting. And in the process of getting ready for that, I realized that I really wasn't raising you alone. I was raising you along with God. And God was there every step of the way. And from that point forward, it made me feel quite differently about
looking at
being a single parent.
And I think too, especially in the African American community, we do have high percentages of single parents.
Exactly.
And so it really is important for people who are raising their children alone. We're focusing on mother-daughter dynamics, but whether it's a father raising his kids alone or a mother raising their children alone, you have to try to look at it or find the positives in that experience and in that journey, because you don't want to appear to your child as if you're down or sad about the fact that you're having to do this job, quote unquote job, of raising them alone. And I think that sometimes you will see parents and they're like frustrated because they're having to raise their child alone, and they almost will take it out on their kids sometimes unconsciously, right? Or is it subconsciously?
Subconsciously.
Yeah, subconsciously, taking it out on their...
No. I'm sorry, it's unconscious.
Okay. Unconsciously taking it out on, their kids, because they're just frustrated about feeling like they're alone. But I love the fact that you were looking at it like, you know what? God is with you in everything that you do, right?
Right. And I think it's also important to say that even though, society sometimes places a stigma on single parents, I never felt that, because my attitude was, I want to be the best parent that I can be to my daughter.
Exactly. And whether you have another parent that's helping you, parents are always learning and growing themselves.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
So you can't come down too hard on yourself.
Right.
So within us saying that, and we're talking about parenting styles, how do you think your parenting style with me was different than the parenting style of how you were actually raised?
Okay. Well, as you know, I grew up in a very small town in southeast Missouri, right on the Arkansas border. My mother was a single parent as well from the time I was 12 years old, and there were 8 of us. So my mom was always working, and I give so much credit to her for what she did for us as a parent.
Oh, let me interject real quick. So y'all know my name is Nia Olivia. Olivia is named after my grandmother. My grandmother's first name was Olivia.
Right,
so I just
right.
wanted to say that.
But my mother was a loving mother, but she was a tough taskmaster. And quite frankly, she was harder on the two girls than she was the boys. But because of the way she approached me, which was basically, you know, I didn't have a lot of freedom.
Right.
As compared to my friends. And my friends could, you know, they could stay out late and do all of that, but I had to be home early. My mother kept, you know, close tabs on me, and she was a strict disciplinarian.
So with me, it was kind of a little bit of almost the opposite, but you know, and you live and you learn, because I know, like, my mom gave me, I would say, a good amount of freedom growing up. For you who don't know, I was raised in St. Louis, Missouri, and I definitely think that we had, you know, good trust, but you allowed me to have a good bit of freedom. And, you know, sometimes, though, those things...
A little bit too much.
A little bit too much. Those...
And let me just say, in that process, because I just want to go back for a minute to what I said about my mother being a disciplinarian. Because of that, I vowed, you know, I don't want to be like that, you know. So you didn't get, you know, whippings like, you know, I got. But, you know, there were times when I was just kind of at a loss for how do I get this child to do what I need her to do without being my mother. And I remember one time when you were like 5th grade, maybe 6th grade, and you didn't want to wash the dishes. And I was like, Nia, you need to go wash the dishes. And you said, oh, I'll get them later, I'll get them later. And it just, you know, I kept saying, Nia, you need to go wash the dishes. And you kept saying, oh, I'll get them later, I'll get them later. And finally, I got angry. And I sort of snatched you up a little bit and swatted you on your bottom. Can I say that? Okay, so you took off running to your room. You got inside the room and you barricaded the door with a chair. And the next thing I know, I hear, 911, 911. And I'm like, oh, snap. I'm a lawyer. I'm an officer of the court. And my daughter's calling the police on me. So I just lost it. I started running through the house, trying to get in the room, pushing at the door, and I got the door open. And I looked at you and I said, Nia, what is wrong with you? And by that time, the phone rang. And I was enraged. I mean, I was totally enraged at that point. But when the phone rang, I thought, that's the police. So I picked up the phone very calmly and I said, hello? And the police woman said, ma'am, we got a 911 call from this number. And I said, oh, officer, I'm so sorry. That was my daughter. She was upset because she didn't want to wash the dishes. And she should not have called you. And she said, all right, instead of, you know, let me come over and make sure you haven't killed her, she said, don't let this happen again, and make sure you teach your daughter not to call the police. So then hung the phone up and I turned to you and I said, I cannot believe you called the police on me. And you said, do you have any idea how hard you hit me?
Look, you should always advocate for yourself. We were talking about different parenting styles, and of course, you said earlier that you were raised in Southeast Missouri and that your mother was essentially like really strict. So give me an example of how strict your mom was.
Well, first of all, my mother was a firm believer in curfews. And the expectation was that, you know, I was not to do any drinking or anything like that. So, of course, I'd get with my friends and I wanted to do what they were doing. So one particular night we went out and I wasn't used to drinking hard liquor at all. So we got some vodka and orange juice. And it just tasted so good that I really didn't realize how much of it I was drinking. So it's at some point I looked at the time and I thought, oh, I better get home. I'm gonna get in trouble. Mm-hmm. But by that time I was pretty intoxicated. Mm-hmm. So they took me home and I thought, well, I can just sneak in. I mean, I know, I'm not gonna turn the lights on. My mother went to bed early. She went to bed around 9:30, 10 o'clock. I know she would not be sound asleep until she knew I was in the house. So I thought, let me tiptoe in, go to my room, and be quiet, and everything will be fine. Well, I go in the living room, and what I didn't realize is my mother had rearranged the furniture that night while I was out.
That was a good one, too. I'm glad you never did that to me.
Yeah. So I walk in, and I'm like, sneaking through, trying to get to my room. And I fell completely over the living room couch. Mm-hmm. At that point, the lights came on. My mother's standing there, and I'm like, oh, mm-hmm. I'm in trouble. Mm-hmm. And my mother was not, she wasn't gonna wait until the next day. Yeah, she lit into me, and it was like a very unpleasant time that I had with her that night. Mm-hmm. So
wow. Yeah. So now let's connect this to as I'm growing up, and I've had instances. I think like the first time I ever came home, I was in college, but visiting St. Louis for like a summer or something like that. And went out somewhere, had vodka and orange juice, which I really hate vodka and orange juice. It's the worst because it's acidic and it just, ugh. Anyway, and I remember throwing up and stuff. And my friends, I had my car, and so I wasn't able to drive. I remember it was a spot off of Goodfellow. Was it off of Goodfellow or was it Union? I don't know. But anyway, so we go to, it was the Omega place, the Omega house, but someone rented it out for a party or something like that. And when we come back, home, one of my friends is driving my car and stuff like that. And so they take me home to the house, and my mom's there at the door. And instead of my mom going off on me, screaming at me, saying, why did you do this? You could have crashed your car. All this stuff could have happened. We probably had that conversation later. Right. When I was sober.
The next day.
Instead, I think you got me a pillow, and I slept on the floor in the bathroom downstairs. Yeah. While I recovered. And I just think, it was better for us to have the opportunity to sit down and talk about it, mm-hmm. versus you just going off on me, because then I didn't have to sneak around you to do stuff. Right. And I was of age, I think, to be drinking.
Yeah, you were in college. So.
I was in college. I don't know if I was 21 though.
I think you were.
Really?
Well, because you got a car.
My second year, but I still would have just been 20. Maybe 21. Yeah, maybe I was. I don't know. I don't know if I was 21.
Right.
Yeah, but still, she did give me the opportunity to have a conversation with her about it, as opposed to, just going off on me. And I think that's definitely a tip for parents. Your kids upset you, and we get that, but instead of you just going off on your kids, really being able to sit down with a calmer tone, you are going to have more of an impact on your child than if you just are screaming at them. Because I know for me, and I told you this even now, if we get in a disagreement, when the volume goes up, I shut down. Yeah. And that's for any disagreement with anybody. I just completely shut, I black out. I'm I don't even know that you were talking, because I can only take a certain tone when, having certain conversations.
Well, and I should just say that you were in no condition for a conversation at that point. And my thing was safety. Mm-hmm. I was very relieved that you got home safe and that your friend had driven you home. Right. And that, for me, was more significant than, oh my God, she is toe up.
Mm-hmm. The next thing that I wanted to discuss has to do with the overall just challenges and conflicts that occur in mother-daughter relationships. And I know that especially as, we're younger, your mother is kind of, telling you everything to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like everything has to go through your parent. And as you get older, you're making decisions now more so on your own. And you're talking to your mother about it, but your mother still isn't the almost like the final say, kind of like in decisions. So I just want to ask you, when you've seen me going down the quote unquote wrong path, making bad decisions, what do you think you've done to kind of sway me back to the direction or to a better direction?
One of the things that I really appreciated about our relationship is that we could pretty much talk about, well, I'm not going to say everything, because I know you didn't tell me everything.
Yeah, not everything, but definitely we were able to
But we were able to talk
like
things through. Right.
I think my friends even, sorry to cut you off, but my mom has always been kind of like that cool mom, like that, they kind of know like, oh, Nia's mom is cool, like Nia's mom is, kind of understanding, like, because we do have a very close relationship and we do actually have a friendship.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. But I think because my mother, there were strict rules about, my mother being the authority figure, and you don't question me and all of that. So I made a real effort to make sure that I try to reach you, not just as your parent, but as somebody who cared about you, wanted to see you make the right decisions. So,
and that you also really did have my best interests at heart.
Oh, exactly.
Sometimes there are parents, and even in mother-daughter relationships, where some of the interests of the mother might just be selfish interests or what they want their child to do and want their child to be, as opposed to what will make their child the happiest and what will help them to be the most fulfilled, within their life.
Exactly. So I think I always try to give you an active voice in what you wanted to do in your life.
What about the times that I've disappointed you? Or have there been times when I've disappointed you? How have you reacted within those times?
I think first of all, you start from a standpoint of, having to come to terms with it within yourself as a parent. Even before talking to you or relating to you about it, it's just having to come to terms with it. It's tough to have a child doing things that you don't approve of, for example. And that you, because of your own experiences in life, kind of know, the different outcomes that can result from the path that your daughter or son is taking. So I would first just try to get myself into a place where I felt like I could talk to you about it. Because sometimes you're just upset, to be calm about it, to talk to you about it, and to let you know why I felt that the decisions that you were making at that particular time were not probably going to result in the outcomes that you were looking for.
So let me ask you this. When do you think was like the most difficult time in terms of raising me? Like, when do you feel like you faced the most challenges?
I think it would have been when you were in college that I came to a point where I felt like, oh my goodness, I can't, I can't control what my daughter's doing at this point. I can hope and pray that the lessons that I've taught her or tried to teach her kick in. But, there are times when, you get a phone call or you would not be able to reach you. That probably was the most difficult time. Because I just wanted to know you were okay. But
I don't remember any times in college. I don't remember any times when you couldn't contact me or reach me in college.
There were a couple times when I tried to reach you and didn't get a phone call back. And that to me was the absolute worst. And it might only have been 24 hours.
So y'all call your parents, okay? Call and check on them. I don't even remember this, to be quite honest. I thought I've been very good about, communication with my mom, but there are parts of college, I'll be honest, I don't remember everything, okay? I was having a good time, and, there's just some stuff that I don't remember. So it's definitely possible, but I mean, you did have my friends' phone numbers.
I was getting ready to say, I did call one of your friends at one point.
Okay, I was about to say, I know there were other connections that were able to be made. So.
And your friends, had your back because they weren't going to give me any specific information. Mm-hmm. But I knew that if I called one of your friends, then she was going to call you and say, call your mom.
Okay, so the next thing that I wanted to discuss has to do with kind of like the generational shift that has kind of occurred. Now that I am, an adult and everything like that, and on my own, well, not on my own, because obviously I still rely on you in terms of the conversations that we have in our relationship and stuff like that. But I wanted to know, how did you get to the point of actually trusting my decision-making skills?
I think it happens as a result of, observing you over a period of time and, experiencing your, the things that were happening with you on a daily basis. It probably would have been more so in college. High school, there were times when I felt that, you were exhibiting a certain level of maturity. First and foremost, you went to school out of state. You were at Southern. Yeah. I was in St. Louis, and I always knew and understood that it was, having gone away to college myself, that it was important that you be able to be independent.
And you always, sorry to cut you off, but you always pushed me to go away.
Exactly.
Because there were times when I thought that I was going to stay closer to home, and my mother was definitely telling me, you want to have that experience of going to a college that's further away in a different area, and this is not for everybody. But for me personally, I know that that was the best decision that I could have made for my life, because there's nowhere else that I would have had the opportunity to meet that many different people from different places, and to have the amazing experiences that I had in college. Still, as an adult, I think back on it, and there really just isn't a time that even comes close to it. It was just that good of a period of time. Right. So, yeah.
But I think that, seeing you in high school and giving you a certain amount of freedom in high school.
And, okay, so I'm just going to insert this. I went to a high school that was open campus. So when I was in high school, I was driving, leaving the school, going to the mall, going to the grocery store, coming back, taking a class, going home, taking a nap. We had an open campus. Right. So I was used to, before I even went away to college, having freedom, because for the 4 years that I was in high school, I was able to come and go from my high school as I pleased.
Right. And I felt, to a certain extent, that was preparation for being in college. Right. And being on your own. I mean, it wasn't unlimited freedom. You know? It wasn't like, I'm going to just go and do whatever I want to do.
Right.
And there were many times I remember when you would come to my office after school.
Yep.
Because
your office was in walking distance.
Right, and ride home together. But it was in college when there was that physical distance. And I could not be there to, oversee what you were doing, or to say, oh, Nia, that's not a good idea, that's not a bad idea. But I think the fact that it was clear to me that you were making a good adjustment in college. You did well with your grades, you had a job. There were times when I was scared just because of where you lived, or, where, you having to come and go, late at certain times. But I felt like you were prepared. Yeah. And that you were mature enough at that point to make decisions and to look out for your own welfare. You were not reckless in the sense that you are not going to make sure that you know, didn't put yourself in harm's way.
Right. I think one of the other things to touch on is like, even when we get to the point of being adults, it's okay to ask your parents if you trust them, because now we can't all trust our parents. Let's just real. Every mama is not a trustworthy mama. When it comes to getting advice, just because our parents have lived their own lives, they have their own frame of reference, they have their own traumas, you know, just all of those things are variables in the type of parent that we have. However, with my mother, I have had a lot of trust in knowing that if I ask her something, she is going to give me an answer that is going to be for my benefit and not for her benefit. And I think that even as an adult, you know, I think of one experience where I came to you without going into detail about it, and I asked you if I should let go of a relationship that I was in that just wasn't really positive. And I kind of been toiling and deciding, oh, I'm going to stay, oh, I'm going to go. But I remember having that conversation with you. I was parked off Sugarloaf at the Publix. And I'm like, Mom, like, should I go? Like, is it time? Like, is it over? And my mother was like, it's over. It's done. Like, you need to get out. You need to leave. And she did that, you know, for my safety. And I just appreciate you in being honest, but I also am grateful that I took my mother's advice and I said, let this be done. You know, like, I wasn't just like, oh no, I don't want to listen to her. I think especially sometimes when people are in relationships, they have a difficulty listening to what other people see, what other people say. And sometimes other people who do really, really care about you can see things that you can't even see, and maybe you see it, but they still see it in a different light too, and they want the best for you. So when someone is trying to give us advice, and it could be our parent, and it's about relationships or different things, it's because they've already been there before, right? They've already gone through different trials and tribulations where relationships are concerned, and they really just already know that the outcome, you said this earlier in the video, that the outcome is going to be something negative. The other thing that I wanted to touch on was just like any advice we could give to someone else in terms of their mother-daughter relationships, when it comes to communication, when it comes to, you know, mutual respect. And I think one of the things that I have really loved about our relationship is the fact that it's like a no judgment zone. And I can come to you and talk to you about anything. Like, I literally remember, and now I don't want to get too personal here, okay, y'all? But when I, you know, how do I say this? When I lost my virginity, right? Like, my sister was the first person that I called, okay? And when I talked to my sister, she's like, you know, you need to talk to her because you have to have an adult with you in order to go to, like, you know, Planned Parenthood or whatever and get, like, contraceptives or on birth control and stuff like that. And I was scared to tell my mom about it. Like, I was very, very scared. But my sister, like, encouraged me, like, no, you have to talk to her. Like, you know, this is just something that you need to do. And so I did come to you. I did talk to you. You did go with me to, you know, the Planned Parenthood or whatever kind of thing. But you didn't just like come down on me like, don't have sex, or, you know what I'm saying? Like, you just were never like that to me. And so I didn't have to do a lot of sneaking around my mom. Not to say I was letting her know when I was, you know, doing anything like that, because heck no. But I'm just saying, in that instance, I was able to have that conversation with her without her, you know, getting super like upset at me. So I think one thing I would say, my advice to mothers would be that you make it an open forum for your daughter to come to you, because you would rather your daughter to come to you when they're facing a challenge or needing contraceptives than for them to just keep going the way that they're going without it, you know? Because then more stuff can happen. Correct. A lot of times when people are sneaking, that's when there's teen pregnancies. That's when there's, you know, all these other issues that can occur, versus if they had a parent that they could just go to and talk to, and then they could figure out, you know, how to solve that problem. So, yeah, I think that is something that's That's really important to me. The other thing, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I really did.
Oh, okay.
I just want to say that was a tough one.
Really? And I was old. Y'all, I lost my virginity when I was like not young.
That was a tough one because, in spite of the fact that I tried to keep myself cool on that, no mother wants to hear that her daughter just lost her virginity. And unconditional love, I said it before, and that is what guided me there. But that doesn't mean
that it was easy.
Or that I wasn't upset.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. I think the other thing with parents that's really important and that helps with our relationship, because we have good communication, but sometimes your parents are not always right? And I think I'm able to give you feedback. Now, she may not want to take it, but I do give my mom feedback on certain things. And I mean, we're still mother and daughter, so it's not like the relationship has ended. But I think that as parents, you have to be open to your kid telling you, like, hey, mom, I didn't like the way you said this to me, or I didn't care for how you did that. And maybe you're not going to totally change it and make it the way that they would want it, but you at least hear what your child is saying. And take that in, because that's important. Like, in order to have balance in a relationship, you want both people to, feel fulfilled by that relationship.
Well, exactly. And I mean, I try to make sure I hear you and listen, even when I don't agree, because,
And there's 1,000, like, y'all, we don't agree a lot of the
No.
time. We are so different. Like, we have different standpoints on life, but we have a lot of things that we also
do
agree on. So, but we definitely have totally different personalities.
Exactly.
So, yeah. So, yeah. One of the things is with mother-daughter relationships that as you get older, you all have more of a mutual respect for each other. And so there are times when you're able to, like, really be supportive of your mother in a different way than you were as a kid, and same thing with your mother showing that support to you. What do you think, Mom?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think a good example of that would be when your grandmother died, which was in 2019. And, I don't care what your age, the loss of your mother is probably without equal in life. And what I really appreciate looking back on that is the support that you gave me. You came and, we visited my mom in the hospital, after she was basically on life support. And you just held me up. You were there for me in every way. And I cannot even tell you what that meant to me. So that, you go through so many years of taking care of your daughter and making sure and nurturing and making sure that she has what she needs, and just being in that parental role.
Right.
It is really gratifying, though, when you need help and you need support, and then having your daughter be there for you. And that's what you did for me.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you saying that, Mom. Like, I really, really do. I do think it's so important that, yes, as we become adults and into adulthood, that we are supportive of our parents. Because our parents face challenges the same way that we face challenges. They go through loss, they have their wins, but they need support like we need support.
Right.
And so sometimes it's just looking at your parent as a person, as opposed to just being your parent, right? And having empathy for the challenges and just the issues that your parents face. I know that that's something that I have definitely had to really work on, is making sure that I am empathetic to you and understanding that you, just like I go through stuff in my own life, and sometimes we're so focused on us, but you really have to take the time and think about hey mom, are you okay?
Right.
Hey mom,
Right.
do you need anything?
Yeah.
You know, and I think another even just component of that is the time that we spend with our parents. You know, it's great to go to our parents' houses and like eat a meal and everything like that, you know, but also to do activities with our parents, to go places with our parents, to travel with our parents, and not just keep it in that, you know, in that just kind of like house setting, but to continue to have new experiences with our parents as we grow older. Okay, so we wanted to leave you all with a quote. To describe my mother would be to write about a hurricane in its perfect power, or the climbing, falling colors of a rainbow. And that quote is by Maya Angelou. I know why the cage bird sings.
So then, how would you describe me?
So when I think about you, the first thing I think is like, you're so smart. I've always felt like this from the time that I was young, that my mother is just this really, really smart person. She has so much information, but also so much love. And I've appreciated the person that you are in terms of your overall creativity, because I think that like your creativity has definitely helped me to be a creative person, right? There's nobody else that's like you. Like, when people meet my mom, like they know, like she's so unique, like the artwork that you like, or you know, the music, just your taste, like it's kind of eccentric, I think. That's the word that I would put on it. But my mom is just so caring and always there for me. Like, you're my biggest support, you know. Whatever dream I have, you've never told me that my dream was too big. You know, you've always said, I know you can do it. And like, I have appreciated that so much. The camera that I have that I started with on YouTube, like my mom was the person that bought that. Even when I used to film videos back in high school, you bought me my camera. You know, I went to Africa in the first grade. You were always exposing me to different things. I'm an avid reader. Why? Because of you. Because you're constantly reading books. You're sharing books. So there's so many words that I think about in terms of describing you, but I would just say that you're highly intelligent, you're unique, you're loving, you're persistent. You have this level of confidence that's amazing to me, because you are very, very confident, you know, in your role, in your career. Like, she was that deal, y'all, okay? Handling business. And so I've always felt like, how can I ever reach where my mom is? And it makes me a little emotional. Sorry. But I have always felt that way. Like, how will I ever get to the point of like attaining even just like what my mom has attained? So I'm just really, really glad that you've been that, you know, just dynamic role model for me. So I truly appreciate it. Okay, y'all, just want to say thank you so much for watching this video. Also, we want to hear from you. Either what's something that you learned from the relationship, you know, with your mother, or how have the dynamics changed in the relationship that you had with your mother as a child to the relationship that you have right now.
And make sure that you like, share, and subscribe.
That part. And just so you know, my channel is a lifestyle channel. Make sure you check out all of my content. I have a video popping up right here, so definitely watch that next. Again, I hope that you all are healthy, happy, loved, and at peace. Be blessed. Thank you, Mom. I'm so glad that you were here.